a lone woman pulls off the biggest home burglary spree in American history.
She's this criminal mastermind that became the sort of folk hero in South Florida.
Stealing over $6 million in jewelry, furs, and artwork.
She's basically shopping through these people's houses.
She changed her appearance like a chameleon.
And left the police helpless to stop her.
And I said to myself, my God, where is she not hitting? How about the Bahamas? Are they safe? How is this woman not getting caught?
Find out how she did it. Next on Masterminds. During the early 1980s, cocaine wars caused an unprecedented urban crime wave in Miami. To escape, the affluent moved further north to gated and patrolled communities like Boca del Mar and Boca Raton.
It was people getting out of Miami. They were people with money. There was a lot of wealth, fabulous wealth along the intercoastal.
But in 1984, these well-protected communities were hit by a spree of over 500 home burglaries.
It was not uncommon for us in a 5-day period to investigate anywhere from 10 to 12 burglaries in Boca del Mar or in the Boca Raton area. The frequency and the dollar loss started to mount real quick.
The people of Boca del Mar could not go to work and do their shopping without having to worry that their homes were being burglarized.
The loss was not only staggering in dollar amount, but it was alarming in that it wasn't just the typical jewelry and or, say, expensive electronic equipment. It was just about anything of value.
All of South Florida was being racked by this one burglar. It wasn't your typical run-of-the-mill crook that we were dealing with. I mean, burglaries went unsolved.
Police discover similar MOs in all the crimes.
The burglaries always occurred during Monday through Friday. The point of entry was always through the front door. And that pillowcases were missing from the master bedroom. There was no witnesses, there was no latent prints. The perpetrator was obviously the same person.
The police were unable to identify the perpetrator because they assumed the crimes could only have been committed by a man.
This completely blew me off my feet. Here I'm dealing with a prolific burglar who's a woman and very good at what she does.
That was what was so cool about it. You know, she wasn't the person that I imagined stealing my VCR.
Judy Amar was the mastermind behind America's largest home burglary spree, stealing over $6 million in furs, jewelry, and artwork.
It was just an exciting feeling. I just thought, wow, this is marvelous. Catch me if you can.
The question is, how did she do it? Judy Amar is the mastermind behind the greatest home burglary spree in U.S. history, leaving the police helpless to stop her. Amar grew up poor on an Arkansas farm.
Very boring, not adventuresome. It was a farming community, and I really didn't like what I was doing.
After an unwanted teenage pregnancy, she leaves her child to be raised by her parents and moves to Miami.
I was told that, nobody wanted me. I wasn't good looking. The same thing that most girls get in trouble for.
In Miami, desperate to support herself, she accepts an offer from a boyfriend to help him rob homes.
So I needed money. He asked me to drive him somewhere because no one would be suspicious of a woman. You go in the house, you look for the jewelry. That's it, you come back to the car. He wasn't really that good at it. You always seem to mess up everything.
During a burglary, Judy and her accomplice are arrested by the police. However, due to insufficient evidence, all charges are dropped.
From now on, if I'm taking a chance of getting arrested, and I'm going alone, it was better because I didn't have to worry about him messing up something or getting in my way. So that's when I started.
She had a lot of different abilities that made it a natural choice, so to speak, for her. She had a plan and a scheme, and that's what made her different than your average burglar.
Amar now sets out to revolutionize home burglary, starting with how she finds her targets.
The Sunday real estate section was Judy's Guide to Burglary. It's where developers of housing projects try to tout the amenities they're offering in their homes. Basically, they lay out all these floor plans, which for a burglar, in hindsight, it's incredible information. She used that to her advantage. She could see whether these homes were being sold, for instance, with security systems installed. She could see if the doors were recessed. Just from looking at the house diagrams, she could plan 30 burglaries in 30 different brand new neighborhoods sitting there with the Palm Beach Post.
Having determined her target, Amar now creates the perfect persona for herself.
The wigs were, by far and away, the greatest asset she had in trying to disguise herself.
I had several different ones. I had a long, straight with bangs, one that was done with curls that was frosted. I had an afro. I had a short one, but I would just change.
Judy knew how to dress when she went out. High heels. She always wore high heels. Slacks, because she did know that she might have to make some sort of getaway. She just looked good, you know, she looked like she belonged.
No one would give her a second thought because professional businesswomen is a very common occurrence here in Boca Del Mar and in Boca Raton. Very common to see a woman executive or a woman real estate agent dressed this way.
She could go into gated communities and just, you know, wave at the guard. Hi, how you doing? And she'd look like she belonged there, which is something that her compatriots couldn't pull off.
The next step in Amar's plan is to obtain untraceable transportation.
The idea is to change the automobiles as often as possible. If the police are looking for a red Plymouth, you come back in a blue Chevrolet, you completely befuddled everyone. They're not looking for that car.
At least once a week, she rents a different car and always pays in cash.
So you give them $300, $500, and you take the car. As long as you keep the payments up, you don't have a problem.
To further ensure her vehicle is untraceable, Amar changes the license number to prevent witnesses from correctly identifying her car. Having found her target and secured transportation, Amar now determines the perfect time to strike.
She would look for our deputies, and she'd stay back several car lengths and just watch them and follow them. And if he went into a particular restaurant, she knew that darn well that the deputy was now going to eat. That's a good 30 minutes.
For Amar, this is the window of opportunity. She heads immediately to her target. She has chosen this house because its recessed front door helps conceal her activities.
Because I would have covering, and the people next door really couldn't see anyone standing there.
She would put that Gucci bag on her arm and strides right up to the door like she belonged there. She knew where she was going. She'd knock on the door. She could think on her feet. Someone caught her in the act of something. She would say, "Oh, I've got the wrong house. I'm so sorry to bother you." She leaves. But if there's no one there, no one answers the knock, no dogs are barking, she goes to work.
And inside of her purse was her 12-inch long screwdriver.
She knew exactly where to place the screwdriver to get this door open.
She would insert the blade of the screwdriver between the frame of the door and the locking mechanism and jam it as far as she could possibly get it and begin to bend it. And eventually the lock is wide open and she uses the screwdriver to push the lock back. Now she's got an entry into the house.
The only problem is, she's triggered the alarm system.
Judy was not afraid of alarms.
The vast majority of alarm calls are false alarms, and the police know that, and Judy knew that.
The master bedroom was first. At that point, she knew she had about 60 seconds before the alarm system would go off. She'd go to the closet, get the designer clothes, grab a pillowcase off the bed.
She knew what she was looking for. Things that would sell well.
It was a strand of pearls with a piece of jade in the middle, and it had sapphires and diamonds around it.
She's basically shopping through these people's houses.
There was 2 Paget watches, beautiful antique pieces.
Things that she would like and might keep for herself.
Amar is in and out in 90 seconds, but she's so bold, she goes back for more.
After I got that in the car, I had seen the Remington statue on the way out, and I went back in and took it.
Judy Amar is at the height of her powers, stealing $250,000 worth of goods in a single burglary. The only problem is, her past is about to catch up with her. America's most prolific home burglar, Judy Amar, has broken into hundreds of houses and scored over $6 million in jewelry, furs, and art.
Now they've increased from 1 reported on Tuesday and 1 on Wednesday to 2 or 3 on Monday, 4 on Tuesday, 2 on Wednesday. I mean, she was just having a field day. She was going wild.
Then in 1985, the police finally get a lucky break.
And a man came home from work and actually found Judy in his house. And she literally ran right past him, got in the car and drove away.
For the first time, the police realize the criminal they're searching for is a woman.
One of the other detectives had remembered a woman who years before had been arrested for the same thing in the same area.
When the police search their database for that period, it reveals Judy's name.
I mean, it lit up just like if you hit 777 on a slot machine in Vegas. We got Judy's picture, put it in a lineup, brought it to him, and instantly he picked her out, said that was the woman.
The police also establish the make and model of Judy's car. They issue a statewide bulletin. Despite her close call, Judy brazenly targets a second home that day.
One of our deputies had been alerted we were looking for a particular car that Judy was using. It was a blue Chevrolet. He's yelling into the radio that he had found a car and it was unoccupied. So he took up a position and waited for the troops to get there.
And there was police dragnet forming, and she knew that she was about to get cornered.
Amar escapes out the back, then breaks into the house next door, where she finds a set of car keys.
And I pulled the wig off and go, because if someone had seen me and gave a description, they're giving the wrong one. I look nothing like it.
There's a Mercedes sedan parked in the garage. And she's so brazen, she waves to an officer, the officer waves back, and she got away. She just drives right through the police dragnet.
One of the detectives who she drove by, he had no real clue what she looked like that day because she changed her appearance like a chameleon. Today she could be a redhead, tomorrow she's a blonde, and on Friday she would be a brunette. This woman was good. When we realized that she had given us the slip, and I remember the temper tantrum that I had, which wasn't pretty, I was livid. I was angry at no one but Judy, and pretty much said to myself, okay, you just made this personal now. This case then came home with me. I had a closet in my house, and I used it as a little mini office. And I would work on this thing at night on my own time. And this became an obsession with me.
Scanning burglary reports from across the state, Tomasi recognizes Judy's MO and realizes she's hitting a much larger territory than he suspected.
She likes to travel. The city of Delray Beach is notifying us that they're having burglaries that match Judy's MO to the T. The city of Boca Raton is, the city of Plantation is, the city of Sunrise is, and then the city of Naples, which is on the other side of Florida, is telling us that they have cases that match. And I said to myself, my God, where is she not hitting? How about the Bahamas? Are they safe? I mean, you know, just how is this woman not getting caught?
It was a lot of work. You had to get up in the mornings just like you were going to a job. You had to find an area to burglarize. Sometimes it was from 8 till 6 or 7 at night.
As Judy's spree continues, police trace her abandoned blue Chevrolet back to a car rental agency near the airport.
They identified her and said, yeah, she comes in here on a regular basis. So now they knew she was wanted. They no longer wanted to do business with her, and they said, if she comes, we're going to call the police.
Tomasi now ups the ante.
We found out about her family in Arkansas and did a background on her son.
At his request, the FBI detains Judy's son.
We kind of figured if we put pressure on her family, that's going to be her Achilles heel. So we started talking to her son. Do you really want to have your mom resisting us and getting herself killed? We don't want your mom getting hurt. She's the one who's upping the ante on this every week.
The son refuses to give his mother up. When Judy learns the FBI is leaning on her family, she's outraged.
That hit a sore spot with Judy. That was her Achilles heel, was her son, because she became livid with me, and she called me from somewhere in Miami.
And told him to leave my family alone, that my family had nothing to do with this, and I was not in Arkansas.
She was furious at me for reaching out for her family. But if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes.
He said, you need to turn yourself in. I said, I can't do that.
Judy Amar's refusal to surrender, however, is about to threaten both her life and Ron Tomasi's. "16 months pass in the Amar burglary investigation, without the police getting any closer to catching her.
They didn't know where to find her. They were being driven crazy. Poor Ron Tomasi, he became obsessed with finding Judy to the point where the little things that she would do would irritate him to no end. And he'd just get more and more stressed.
I said, I'm living this case. I'm eating this case. I'm breathing this case. I can't sleep at night because of this case.
And I love police detectives, but they're the most macho, guys in the world. They don't want anyone to get away with anything. But here's somebody who's clever and smarter and a woman, and they can't catch a girl. There was just something that was galling about that.
Pushed to the point of exhaustion, Tomasi suffers a heart attack and is forced off duty for weeks.
He was so obsessed with it. I think that was his problem. He had his hands full. His children even knew my name.
The very day that I went back to work, I was notified that Judy Amar had been identified as hiding in a motel in Surfside from an informant in Miami.
I think if it had not been for this guy and a drug charge, trying to get a lenient sentence, well, he told on him. He told her where she was.
With an army of undercover agents, Tomasi stakes out the motel.
So we had snipers and everybody in place. We didn't know what we were going to deal with, whether she was going to quietly submit to us or we would have to shoot it out. She came home at about 8:20, 8:30 in the morning. She comes to her door. And the moment she put the key into the motel door to open it, everybody came out.
I remember turning around, and the black guy, I think, had the chain with his badge around it. He's in a squat position with a gun like this.
She was so completely stunned, she said that she looked around, there were guns everywhere. She just, thank God, she just surrendered and it was over. The room was filled from top to bottom, from wall to wall, with statues, clothing, shoes, apparel, jewelry. You just couldn't imagine. It looked like a little warehouse or a little store. I remember when we sat as close as we are now, and I looked into her eyes, and she was crying. And then she said to me she was glad it was over. She actually told me, I'm glad it's over now. And I told her, same thing, I'm glad it's over.
Judy Amar pleads guilty to multiple charges of burglary and is sentenced to 10 years. In 1990, she is released from prison.
It was an obsession. I would go by a house, and it was just this haunting feeling. And then I decided that I was going to do things right no matter what. And I was determined not to burglarize anybody anymore.
Since her release, the Bandit Queen has used her unique skills to teach Americans how to make their homes more secure.
It was one of the biggest crimes committed in the century.
A crooked cop pulls off a bank job worth over $10 million.
He was talented, well organized, and incredibly intelligent.
He committed the perfect crime, then mocked authorities.
It's hard to describe the arrogance. He just figured he was untouchable.
Find out how he did it, next on Masterminds. Medford, Massachusetts. In the early 80s, this quiet suburb of Boston was booming.
People had jobs, people had money, people were spending money, people were making money.
There was a lot of money around, and there was a lot of money in the bank.
And the richest bank in Medford was Depositors Trust. Its security system was state-of-the-art.
The alarm is wired into both the alarm company and the police station. The vault has 18 inches of reinforced concrete.
There were massive time-lock steel doors. Inside was a safe and 1,000 double-key deposit boxes. The vault seemed impregnable. But on Memorial Day weekend, 1980, the unthinkable happened. Depositors Trust became the scene of the largest bank burglary in New England's history.
Come that Tuesday morning, the bank opened, and they opened up and said, oh my God, what happened here?
$10 million in cash and jewels was gone. 1,000 armor-plated deposit boxes had been smashed open. The highly sophisticated silent alarm hadn't gone off, and the reinforced concrete ceiling had a hole blown through it.
It was incredibly bizarre. This is the type of a job you see in Hollywood. That's the type of crime this was.
The FBI was immediately notified and had jurisdiction over the crime scene. They did an extensive investigation.
There were no witnesses, no fingerprints, and no burglary tools.
Well, there was no evidence because they had been so careful about covering their tracks. They had made sure that anything that went into the bank came out with them. In that sense, it was the perfect crime. It's an immediate big story, and it's not just a big story at the Medford level. It's a big story at the state level and at the federal level.
The question then arose as to who were the suspects and who could have possibly perpetrated a job of this magnitude. But there was really no prime suspects at that point, other than the fact that it had to be a bunch of professionals.
The gang was led by a professional police officer, Captain Jerry Clemente. A career cop obsessed with money and power had pulled off a multi-million-dollar heist. The question is, how did he do it? Police Captain Jerry Clemente is the mastermind behind a $10 million heist at the Medford, Massachusetts Depositors Trust. The burglary is the climax of years of corruption that started with his first night on the force, when he was partnered with a veteran cop named Crusher.
They were going through Medford and they saw this guy running down the street holding a stolen lawn chair.
To Jerry's surprise, Crusher knows the thief.
He turned out to be another cop. The guy picks up the lawn chair, goes away. Crusher says to Jerry, two things, Jerry. Number one, if you see a cop with a television, a piece of furniture, anything at all, mind your own business. Whatever he's doing is his business. Number two, don't play high and mighty. The lesson he learned was corruption was accepted. It was easy to move beyond that, almost imperceptibly, to a point where you were doing wholesale corrupt activities.
Jerry quickly discovers he has a talent for planning and executing burglaries. He furnishes his entire house with stolen goods. But he's also a brave cop. Early in his career, Clemente is awarded a Medal of Valor for his role in the takedown of an armed gangster.
He had a good reputation in law enforcement circles. You know, he was a good guy, solid guy, you know, a go-to guy.
But his double life as criminal and crime fighter soon spills over into his personal affairs.
Here's a married man with a family, living, you know, a happily married life in a community on the surface, who at the same time is having a clandestine sexual affair. So it certainly must have been part of Jerry's makeup to want to lead a double life.
As Clemente moves up through the ranks of law enforcement, he's drawn to more ambitious crimes. He partners with Sergeant Tom Doherty.
Tom Doherty was always a rogue. He was arrogant, out of control, and basically abused his badge from probably the first day he wore it.
In 1978, Clemente and Doherty pull their first big job. The target? The police department.
They would steal the police promotional exam before it was given, make copies of it, sell it for $5,000 to somebody who wanted to be a police chief someplace. They manipulated and controlled who they wanted in command positions in the city and town police departments. They were very powerful back at that time, very powerful. And Jerry Clemente was at the top of it.
Then in 1980, Clemente and Doherty see an opportunity to become multi-millionaires. They decide to hit depositors' trust.
They both knew in the back of their minds that this was the big score. This was, of all the planned criminal activities that they were involved in, this was the one that was going to set them up for life. Because Tommy had his own safety deposit box in the bank, he was able to go in and case the place. While he was in there, he mentally paced off the dimensions of the vault, noted, you know, where the safes were, where the deposit boxes were.
Based on this information, Clemente knows he needs a specialized team to pull off the job. He recruits fellow crooked cop Joe Banks and a gangster known as Brother O'Leary.
They were going to have to bypass the alarm, so they needed an alarm guy, and that was Bucky Barrett.
Bucky Barrett was, by all accounts, an expert at alarms and was, by all accounts, a professional burglar.
The alarm was a major obstacle that the gang had to get over because it was wired into both the Medford police station and to the alarm company. And it was a silent alarm. So if you triggered it at the bank, you wouldn't know that it had gone off.
Bucky realizes he'll have to bypass the alarm using sophisticated electronics. He assembles a device to block the outgoing signal. For 2 months, Clemente and Bucky Barrett return to the bank each night to test every wire.
He had to test each wire individually to figure out which was the alarm wire so he could set up the bypass box and disable the alarm.
Jerry also makes reconnaissance patrols.
They made dry runs, staked out the bank, much the way police officers would stake out an alleged scene of a crime. I mean, they staked out their scene of the crime.
Confident it's a go, Clemente now sets a date for the heist, the Memorial Day weekend.
During Memorial Day weekend in 1980, there were a number of public events going on, including a carnival, a lot of noise, a lot of commotion into the late night hours. That really worked very well for the conspirators.
The team now makes final preparations.
They had acetylene torches, they had dynamite, they had special magnesium burning rods, carbide core bits for the drills. Everything that they needed for any eventuality, they had prepared carefully ahead of time.
The night of the burglary, the gang moves into position. Clemente is confident he won't be discovered because his lookout man is the senior cop on duty for the entire city of Medford, Tommy Doherty.
If anybody did come along he'd be able to make sure they moved on, or if they came too close, he could tell them to go away, because he was, after all, a police officer.
With everything in place, Clemente sets his plan in motion.
The steps of the burglary began with them bypassing the alarm system at the rear of the building. After that was accomplished, Jerry Clemente picked the lock to the shop next door, which gave them access to the upper loft area.
Inside the shop's attic, they break through the wall leading to the bank.
That wall was made of cinder blocks. So in a matter of minutes, they had smashed through there. They were able to crawl into the crawl space above the vault.
So they then could start the tunnels through the actual ceiling of the vault.
Using power from a nearby fuse box, they start to drill through the vault ceiling.
And they knew exactly where to drill in order to create the hole, from Tommy having mentally cased the place.
You know, the old story, plan your work your plan. Everything was done exact to a T. They knew what they had to do. They were all disciplined guys.
At each step of the way, they would pause and wait, report back to Tommy. Tommy would make sure that nobody had heard anything, that nothing was being reported. He'd have a good look around. Then he'd give them the okay to go on to the next stage of the operation.
But an hour into the job, there's a big problem. Doherty radios Clemente to shut everything down and keep quiet. The owners of Brigham's restaurant next to the bank have come to take inventory. Clemente has Doherty spring into action.
Tommy went in, told these people, I'm sorry, we've had some, criminal activity around here lately. We really can't have you doing inventory in the middle of the night, and got them to leave and go home.
And they were quite impressed that, geez, great police response here.
Doherty gives Clemente the all clear. Above the vault, the men resume working on the 18 inches of steel-reinforced concrete. Clemente has brought dynamite, but he knows he's taking a risk.
The risk obviously being they're in the middle of a downtown area in Medford, that would be heard by the neighbors and that they would be discovered.
They pile sandbags on the dynamite to direct the blast downward and muffle the sound.
As it happens, nobody reported any sound. It's possible that people heard a loud bang, but maybe they thought it was revelry from the carnival.
The explosives were able to dislodge the concrete, but it still left the wire mesh that had to be cut with an acetylene torch.
It's hot, time-consuming work, but by 3 a.m. they break through the vault ceiling.
So when they dropped down into the vault, they had all of this debris all over the place and all of this dust floating in the air.
Their main target is the safe.
At the rear of the vault was a larger safe which the bank used for their cash for their customers.
Bucky sets to work with an acetylene torch. O'Leary and Bangs start prying open the safety deposit boxes. It takes an hour to cut through the safe's hinges.
Bucky opens the safe. There's only 60 grand. They're all incredibly disappointed. Months of preparation, careful planning, high risk, incredible expectations, and they're sitting there with $60,000.
Unfortunately, they found a very small amount of cash, principally because it was Memorial Day weekend and most of the cash had already been removed by the bank employees and sent to the Federal Reserve for the weekend.
There's nothing more Jerry can do. They've run out of time.
It's in May, so there's an early dawn, and they got to be out of there before it gets light. It's not turning out exactly the way that they thought it would, so they'll go back to Joe's house. So Jerry says, well, we've got 2 more nights to come back in and to go through and break open as many of these safety deposit boxes as we can.
Had this been your typical burglars, they would never have risked going back the second and third night. But Jerry Clemente knew that with 3 active police officers involved in this conspiracy, they had an absolute control over preventing anyone from law enforcement ever detecting that they were inside that vault.
Back in the vault, they set to work on the safety deposit boxes. But the problem is, it's taking 15 minutes to open each one.
Initially, they were breaking through these cylinder locks by manually using a screwdriver and breaking out these cylinder locks. They found that took an inordinate amount of time.
So then he discovered this new method, which was basically to use the chisel and hammer to break off the hinges.
It was much faster. It enabled them to open more doors in a quicker way.
Over the next 2 nights, the gang uses this new method to break into 1,000 deposit boxes and empty the vault.
So there was close to $2 million in cash, but there was also pink diamonds, rare jewels, ordinary diamonds, expensive watches.
They were lugging so much stuff out of there, they were exhausted, and they were doing it under the protection of the police. It's frightening. They were the police.
72 hours after breaking into the vault, Clemente and his crew escape with $10 million in cash and jewels.
Well, the first thing they did is they split the cash 6 ways. So they all got their take of the cash, which was about 200 grand apiece.
But dividing the jewelry is much more difficult.
The problem was then jewelry is identifiable, and they had a problem of how could they get rid of it and convert that into cash.
Clemente decides to leave it with Joe Banks. Now all he has to do is wait, and he and his crew will be very rich. But this treasure will set one gang member against another and threatens to destroy them all. Jerry Clemente and his crew of crooked cops have pulled off a brilliantly planned bank burglary, netting more than $10 million in cash and jewels.
When the bank manager came in on Tuesday morning, he found on the floor of the vault papers in empty boxes between knee-deep and 4 feet high. One of the people who came to protect the scene until the FBI arrived was Sergeant Thomas Doherty.
The robbery's lookout man is now a spy inside the investigation. Doherty keeps Clemente informed of FBI progress.
The speculation was there had to be an insider involved, there had to be someone with local knowledge. A number of people were interviewed, including Tom Doherty, Jerry Clemente, both of whom were on duty during part of that weekend. But while there was a lot of speculation and rumor that Jerry Clemente was in fact the mastermind, there was no physical evidence connecting him to the burglary.
When investigators try to shake Clemente's alibi, his mistress, Barbara Hickey, backs him up.
He instructed her that if she were asked where he was on those nights, that she was to say that he was with her for the entire night.
Knowing authorities have nothing concrete, Clemente stonewalls.
The fact that Jerry is a captain in the police department means that he understands police procedure. He understands the rules of evidence. He knows what it is that they need in order to prove that he did it. He also knows that they can't put it together. So he feels that even though they have strong suspicions, and even though they can make life difficult for him, that he's in the clear.
The FBI continues to investigate. They put Clemente under 24-hour surveillance, but Clemente knows he's being watched.
Without knowing the guy, it's hard to describe the arrogance. He just figured he was untouchable. They had thrown everything they had at him, and he walked away.
As the case against him grows cold, Clemente lies low, waiting for the statute of limitations to run out.
Jerry's very conscious that at this stage, they have less than a year to go, and they're home and dry in the Depositors Trust heist.
The clock was ticking, and honestly, unless something happened, this was going to be an unsolved crime.
But just as police are about to abandon the investigation, Clemente is hit with a crisis. Tommy Doherty and Joe Bangs start spinning out of control.
They're both using cocaine heavily. They're both incredibly paranoid.
And soon the friction between them with the freebase and being paranoid, and they also started to think one of them might be dropping a dime on the other, and that's when the whole ball started rolling down the hill.
All of a sudden, guns are out, and Joe Bangs gets shot. It's the worst thing that could have happened. One, that Tommy shot him. Two, that he didn't kill him, because it just brought total chaos to their whole operation.
The state cops arrive to investigate the shooting. They find drugs and jewelry in Joe Bangs' car.
That jewelry allowed a clear link to be made between Joe and the Depositors Trust heist. And it allowed the police to put pressure on Joe.
With police leaning on one gang member and another in jail, Jerry Clemente is facing the greatest threat of his criminal career.
So his life is basically turned upside down. But he knew that if he just kept his cool, and that if the others kept their cool, that they couldn't be broken.
With the discovery of the stolen jewelry, police are determined to bring down Clemente and his gang.
The adrenaline gets fired up a little more. And it's one of the biggest crimes that committed in the century. I mean, these are bad cops. If you're bad cops, you want to get them.
While authorities build their case against Clemente, Tommy Doherty goes on trial for the shooting of Joe Bangs. Doherty's lawyer presses Bangs about the jewelry found in his car.
Isn't it true, Mr. Bangs, that you had a kilo of cocaine in the trunk of your car? Yes, it is. And isn't it true that you had some jewelry in the trunk of your car? Yes, it is. And I suppose that jewelry was stolen, too. Bangs responded. He finally had it. He goes, yes, sir. It was stolen jewelry. I stole it with your defendant on Memorial Day weekend, 1980. And the whole court went into an uproar. It was the biggest break that came along on it.
Doherty is found guilty, and Joe Bangs tells prosecutors everything about the depositor's trust heist. But police need more.
Joe Bangs carried a lot of baggage and had very low credibility. The problem we faced is that a jury would say, you're only saying this and implicating others because you want to save your own skin.
Investigators then get a break when they learn Clemente has left his mistress, Barbara Hickey.
They were working with her and working with her and working with her, and they were getting nowhere with her, none at all. And so they were kind of throwing up their hands and turning to leave when she said to him, well, I don't know if this helps, but would it make any difference that he came home one night that weekend loaded with dust and dirt all over him? Does that make cement powder and that type of thing? Would that be helpful to you?
For Jerry Clemente, Barbara Hickey's turning on the gang is the worst thing that could possibly happen. It brings down the whole house of cards.
Jerry Clemente is arrested and charged with 4 counts of breaking and entering with intent to commit a felony. Although the evidence against him is strong, he's unconcerned, continuing to believe he's pulled off the perfect heist.
Jerry was always super confident. He always had faith in his ability to get out of any situation that he might find himself in. He knew how to cover his tracks, he knew how to make sure that the right people were involved, and he knew how to make sure that when it came down to it, the odds were stacked in his favor.
He was an intelligent, articulate guy. He had spent a lot of time planning and preparing for this burglary, and yet I think to the end never believed that the government would be able to prove and have a jury believe and convict him of the crime.
But at his trial, his former mistress, Barbara Hickey, is the prosecution's star witness.
Out of a clear blue sky, he said that he was going to have a lot of money and he would never have to work a day in his life again.
Her testimony finally puts the corrupt cop behind bars.
Jerry got 30 to 40 years, so it was the maximum sentence, and they nailed him.
It's particularly satisfying when it's a police officer and you realize that this is someone who had corrupted the system, who had breached his trust, and who should be brought to justice.
After 10 years in jail, Jerry Clemente is paroled. He is currently without a job and is fighting for his police pension.